The Christmas gathering at Mom and Dad's house in Westchester had been carefully orchestrated to showcase what Dad called the family's upward trajectory. Everything from the imported wine to the catered dinner reflected his obsession with projecting success. Dad sat at the head of the mahogany dining table wearing a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, discussing his latest investment portfolio achievements with anyone willing to listen. "The diversification strategy has been absolutely brilliant," Dad announced, swirling his $300 bottle of Bordeaux. "My wealth management team at Goldman suggested reallocating 30% of our holdings into emerging markets, and the returns have exceeded every projection." Uncle Richard nodded approvingly from his position to Dad's right. "What kind of annual yield are you seeing on the international funds?" "Consistent 12 to 15%, Dad replied with obvious satisfaction. "The portfolio managers say they've rarely seen such sustained growth across multiple sectors simultaneously." He gestured grandly around the dining room, which had been recently renovated with marble countertops, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. "This lifestyle doesn't happen by accident," Dad continued. "It requires sophisticated financial planning, strategic risk assessment, and the discipline to make intelligent long-term investment decisions." Mom beamed with pride from her seat beside him. "Harold's investment portfolio has grown by over 200% in just the past 3 years. 240% actually," Dad corrected with a modest smile. "The wealth advisors at Meridian Elite Capital have been absolutely phenomenal. They've constructed a portfolio that generates substantial passive income while maintaining aggressive growth potential." Cousin Michael leaned forward with genuine interest. "Meridian Elite Capital? I've heard they only work with ultra-high net worth clients." "Exactly," Dad nodded. "Minimum investment threshold is $10 million. They don't waste time with small accounts or unsophisticated investors." He pulled out his phone and opened what appeared to be a financial app, displaying impressive charts and numbers to anyone close enough to see. "Current portfolio value is sitting at approximately $75 million, generating roughly $850,000 in annual passive income. That's before capital gains, of course." The numbers drew impressed murmurs from around the table. I sat quietly at the far corner, still wearing the cheap blazer I'd bought at a discount store because I couldn't afford anything nicer on my $42,000 annual salary as a community college adjunct professor. "The key is understanding market dynamics," Dad explained, clearly enjoying his role as the family's financial expert. "Most people make emotional investment decisions based on fear or greed. Sophisticated investors like myself work with professional wealth managers who understand global economic trends." Aunt Susan looked genuinely amazed. $75 million. "Harold, I had no idea your portfolio had grown so substantially." "Conservative estimate, actually," Dad replied casually. "The real estate holdings alone are worth probably another 20 to 25 million, but I don't count those as liquid investments." He gestured around the house with obvious pride. "This property has appreciated nearly 40% since we purchased it 5 years ago. The wealth advisors suggested we could leverage the equity for additional investment opportunities, but we're already generating more passive income than we can reasonably spend." Brother-in-law Tom whistled appreciatively. "What kind of investment vehicles are producing those returns?" Dad launched into detailed explanations of hedge fund allocations, international bond portfolios, private equity partnerships, and something called alternative investment strategies that apparently only ultra-wealthy individuals could access. "The private wealth management team handles all the complex analysis," Dad explained. "They provide quarterly reports breaking down performance metrics, risk assessments, and optimization recommendations. It's incredibly sophisticated." He showed his phone to several family members, displaying what appeared to be professional portfolio statements with impressive graphs and projections. "The beauty of working with Meridian Elite Capital is that they handle everything. Asset allocation, tax optimization, estate planning integration, even concierge services for major purchases." Mom nodded enthusiastically. "They helped us negotiate the terms for this house renovation. Apparently having a $75 million portfolio gives you access to exclusive contractor networks and bulk purchasing agreements. Everything becomes easier when you have serious money," Dad agreed. The investment advisors can arrange financing for virtually anything: vacation homes, luxury vehicles, art collections, even business acquisitions. He turned his attention to me for the first time all evening, his expression mixing pity with mild embarrassment. David, you should really consider letting me introduce you to some basic financial planning concepts. I know your professor's salary doesn't leave much room for investments, but even small amounts can grow over time with proper management. I'm doing okay with my budget, I replied quietly. Dad chuckled condescendingly. Son, I'm talking about real wealth building. Your community college teaching position might seem adequate for day-to-day expenses, but it's not a strategy for long-term financial security. Harold's right, Uncle Richard chimed in. Academic salaries are notoriously limited. You need to think about diversifying your income streams. Dad nodded sagely. The problem with academic careers is that they're essentially charity work disguised as employment. You're trading potential wealth for the satisfaction of helping people, which is admirable but not practical. He gestured around the elegant dining room. This lifestyle requires serious money, David. Investment portfolios, passive income generation, strategic wealth accumulation. Things that are simply impossible on a professor's salary. I understand, I said calmly. Do you though? Dad pressed. Because I sometimes worry that you don't fully grasp the financial realities of adult life. He pulled up another screen on his phone, showing what appeared to be expense calculations. This dinner tonight cost approximately $800 for ingredients and catering. The wine we're drinking retails for $300 per bottle. The flowers on the table were $150. The renovation on this dining room was $85,000. Dad looked directly at me with what he probably thought was fatherly concern. David, that's more than twice your annual salary just for this one room. You're living in a completely different economic universe from the rest of this family. Mom touched Dad's arm gently. Harold, maybe we shouldn't focus on money during Christmas dinner. Actually, Christmas is the perfect time to discuss financial realities, Dad replied. David needs to understand that his lifestyle choices have consequences. He chose academic work over wealth building, and this is the result. He gestured between himself and me, highlighting the obvious contrast. I'm wearing a suit that cost $3,500. David's jacket probably came from a discount store. I drive a car worth more than his annual salary. I own investment properties worth more than he'll earn in his entire career. The room fell uncomfortably silent. Several family members looked embarrassed by Dad's bluntness. The point isn't to make David feel bad, Dad continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. The point is to illustrate the power of intelligent financial decision-making. He returned to his portfolio display, clearly proud of the numbers. Meridian Elite Capital's wealth managers project continued growth of 8 to 12% annually. At that rate, my portfolio should reach approximately $120 million within 5 years. What kind of lifestyle does that level of wealth support? Cousin Michael asked. Dad's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Complete financial freedom. Private jets, luxury vacation properties, exclusive investment opportunities. The wealth advisors say we could easily support annual expenses of $2 to $3 million without touching the principal. He glanced at me meaningfully. That's roughly 70 times David's current salary, just in annual spending money. The investment opportunities at that wealth level become extraordinary, Mom added. Harold's advisors have mentioned private equity deals, venture capital funds, even opportunities to purchase entire companies. Dad nodded approvingly. When you have serious money, money makes money exponentially. The compound returns on a $75 million portfolio create wealth faster than most people can imagine. As the evening progressed, Dad continued detailing his investment successes, his relationship with elite wealth managers, and his family's trajectory toward even greater financial achievement. Every story somehow circled back to the impressive returns generated by his Meridian Elite Capital portfolio. The quarterly statements are absolutely remarkable, Dad said as Mom served dessert. Sometimes I show them to friends just to watch their reactions. Most people have never seen investment returns at this scale. After dinner, as family members gathered in the living room for coffee and conversation, Dad pulled out what appeared to be official-looking documents from his briefcase. I wanted to share something exciting with everyone, he announced. Meridian Elite Capital invited me to participate in their exclusive ultra-high net worth advisory council. He displayed what looked like an embossed certificate and several bound reports. They only extend invitations to clients with portfolios exceeding $50 million. It's essentially a private investment club where we collaborate on major financial strategies. Uncle Richard examined the documents with obvious admiration. This looks incredibly prestigious, Harold. The networking opportunities alone are worth millions, Dad explained. Last month's meeting included hedge fund managers, real estate moguls, technology entrepreneurs, even a few minor celebrities. He turned to address me directly. David, I know this kind of wealth seems impossible from your perspective, but I want you to understand that it's achievable with the right mindset and professional guidance. I appreciate the advice, I said politely. Dad's expression grew more serious. Son, I'm concerned about your long-term financial security. Community college teaching is essentially a dead-end career path. You're 32 years old with virtually no assets, no investment portfolio, no wealth-building strategy. Harold, Mom warned gently. No, this needs to be said, Dad continued. David is family and family takes care of each other. But there are limits to what we can do if he refuses to make intelligent financial decisions. He gestured around the beautifully appointed room. You'll never afford this lifestyle on a professor's salary, David. The sooner you accept that reality, the sooner you can start making better choices. Several family members nodded in agreement, though they looked uncomfortable with Dad's directness. Maybe David could transition into private sector work, Aunt Susan suggested diplomatically. Use his education background in corporate training or consulting. Excellent suggestion, Dad agreed enthusiastically. Corporate consulting can be quite lucrative. Much more realistic than pretending academic work will ever generate serious wealth. He pulled up another screen on his phone, apparently showing salary comparison data. Senior consultants at major firms earn $150,000 to $300,000 annually. Still nowhere near investment-level wealth, but at least it's respectable income. I'm content with teaching, I said calmly. Dad shook his head with obvious frustration. David, contentment is a luxury for people who can afford it. You're living paycheck to paycheck while convincing yourself that financial security doesn't matter. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at his landscaped grounds. This property, this lifestyle, this level of financial freedom, it's the result of making smart decisions consistently over many years. Working with professional wealth managers, taking calculated risks, prioritizing wealth building over personal satisfaction. Dad turned back to face me directly. You've chosen personal satisfaction over financial security, and that's fine. But don't pretend the consequences don't exist. You'll spend your entire life struggling with money while the rest of this family enjoys genuine prosperity. I understand your perspective, I replied quietly. I hope you do, Dad said. Because at some point the family can't keep subsidizing poor financial decisions. We love you, David, but we can't indefinitely support someone who refuses to help himself. The room fell silent. Mom looked mortified by Dad's bluntness, but several other family members nodded in agreement. Maybe we should change the subject, Mom suggested weakly. Actually, I think this conversation needed to happen, Dad replied. David needs to understand his position in this family's financial hierarchy. He returned to his seat and pulled up his portfolio app again. Meridian Elite Capital's wealth managers project my net worth will exceed $100 million within 3 years. David's net worth will probably never exceed $50,000. Those are just mathematical realities. As the evening wound down and family members began saying their goodbyes, Dad made a point of shaking hands with everyone and discussing their various business successes and investment strategies. When he reached me, his expression was a mixture of disappointment and resignation. David, I hope you'll consider what we discussed tonight. It's never too late to change course, but time is definitely working against you. I'll think about it, I said. Good. And remember, if you ever decide to get serious about wealth building, I'd be happy to introduce you to some entry-level financial advisors. Not Meridian Elite Capital, obviously, they don't work with small accounts, but there are firms that specialize in helping people with limited resources. I drove home to my modest apartment in a 20-year-old Honda Civic, listening to Dad's words echoing in my head. The contrast between his $75 million lifestyle and my community college professor existence couldn't have been more stark. After arriving home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat down at my computer. Dad's humiliation had been thorough and public, exactly as I'd expected. He'd been building toward this moment for months, gradually establishing himself as the family's financial success story while positioning me as the well-meaning but economically naive son who'd chosen passion over profit. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "David, I hope tonight's conversation didn't seem harsh. Sometimes tough love is necessary. You're intelligent enough to build real wealth if you're willing to make sacrifices. The choice is yours." I typed back simply, "Thanks for the advice." Then I opened my secure laptop and accessed my private investment management interface. Meridian Elite Capital appeared on the screen, not as Dad's wealth management firm, but as a subsidiary of my own investment holding company. I composed a brief message to my portfolio management team. "Execute immediate liquidation of account H. Martinez 4471 effective at market open tomorrow. All positions should be closed and assets transferred to standard settlement procedures. Client notification per standard protocol." The message was delivered at 11:43 p.m. I reviewed the account details one final time. Harold Martinez, portfolio value $75,247,000, had been generating impressive returns for exactly 3 years and 4 months, the same duration as his most aggressive bragging phase about his investment success. At 7:15 a.m. the next morning, my phone started ringing. Dad's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 7:32. Then 7:58. By 9:45, I had 11 missed calls and 15 increasingly panicked text messages. The first voicemail was confused but controlled. "David, something very strange is happening with my investment portfolio. Meridian Elite Capital is saying there's some kind of system error. Could you call me back when you get this?" The second voicemail 20 minutes later was noticeably more agitated. "David, I need you to call me immediately. Something's wrong with my accounts. The wealth managers are saying there's been some kind of liquidation, but that's impossible. I never authorized any transactions." By the third voicemail, Dad was clearly panicking. "David, please call me right back. This is an emergency. My entire portfolio is gone. $75 million just disappeared overnight. I don't understand what's happening." The text messages showed a clear progression from confusion to desperation. "David, call me, something's wrong with the investments. This is urgent, I need help understanding what happened. The wealth managers won't explain anything. David, please call me back, I'm scared. I think someone stole my money. $75 million is just gone. David, I don't know what to do." At 10:20 a.m. Mom called. "David, honey, your father is having some kind of panic attack. Something terrible happened with his investments overnight. All his money disappeared. Do you know anything about financial law? Maybe there's someone you could call." "I don't really understand sophisticated investment management," I replied honestly. "He worked so hard building that portfolio. I can't understand how $75 million can just vanish without any explanation." At 11:45 a.m., Dad called again. This time I answered. "David," he sobbed into the phone, his voice completely broken. "Thank God you picked up. Something horrible happened. Someone stole my entire life savings." "What do you mean stolen?" I asked calmly. "My investment portfolio, all $75 million, it's gone. Completely liquidated overnight. Meridian Elite Capital is saying I authorized the transactions, but that's impossible. I never signed anything authorizing a complete liquidation." I could hear him hyperventilating between sentences. "Dad, slow down. What exactly did the wealth managers tell you?" "They said the account holder exercised a full liquidation clause." "But David, I am the account holder. I never requested any liquidation. I don't even understand how someone could access my accounts without my authorization." "That does sound unusual," I agreed. "The customer service representatives keep saying the liquidation was authorized by the primary account administrator, but I don't know what that means. I thought I was the primary administrator." Dad was quiet for a moment, then continued in a smaller voice. "David, I think this might be connected to identity theft. Someone must have stolen my personal information and convinced Meridian Elite Capital to liquidate my entire portfolio. Have you contacted the police? The wealth managers say it's not theft because the liquidation was authorized by someone with administrative access to my account. But David, I never gave anyone else access. I don't understand how this is possible. At 2:15 p.m. Uncle Richard called. David, your father called me crying. Apparently his investment portfolio disappeared overnight. He's talking about identity theft and fraud. Do you have any idea what might have happened? Dad knows much more about financial matters than I do, I said. This whole situation sounds extremely suspicious. Legitimate investment firms don't just liquidate $75 million without proper authorization procedures. At 3:30 p.m., my administrative assistant at Meridian Elite Capital called to confirm completion of the liquidation. All positions in account H. Martinez 4471 have been successfully liquidated, she reported. Total liquidation value was $75,247,832.17. All funds have been transferred to your primary holding account as requested. Any complications with the transaction? None. The account holder had signed standard administrative agreements when the account was established 3 years ago. The liquidation clause was clearly outlined in the original documentation. What about client notification? Mr. Martinez received automatic notifications at each stage of the liquidation process, as required by our standard procedures. He also has access to all original account agreements through our client portal. That evening, Dad called one final time. David, I need to ask you something and please don't take this personally. Okay. Last night at dinner when I was talking about lifestyle and financial security, you seemed, I don't know, unusually calm. Most people would have been angry or defensive when criticized so publicly. I wasn't angry, I said truthfully. But weren't you hurt? When I basically announced that you'd never achieve financial success or be able to afford a decent lifestyle. I considered this carefully. Dad, you were sharing your perspective based on your understanding of the situation. I can respect that. He was quiet for a long moment. David, do you think this could be some kind of cosmic justice? Like the universe punishing me for being cruel to you about money? I don't really believe in cosmic justice, I replied. Because if this is karma, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant to humiliate you. I was proud of what I'd accomplished and I wanted you to understand the importance of financial planning. Dad, you don't need to apologize for being successful. But I wasn't actually successful, he cried. It was all fake. Someone was manipulating my accounts this whole time. They let me think I was a brilliant investor, then they took everything away just to destroy me. I'm sorry this happened to you. The worst part is facing everyone who heard me bragging last night. I have to explain that there never was a $75 million portfolio, that I'm not the financial genius I pretended to be. He started crying again. David, will you help me figure out what to do next? I know I said terrible things about your financial situation, but you're the only person I trust to give me honest advice. Of course I'll help however I can. Thank you. And David? I'm sorry I said you'd never afford a decent lifestyle. That was cruel and probably wrong. The next week, Dad met with several financial advisors and attorneys trying to understand what had happened to his investment portfolio. Eventually, someone explained that his original account agreements had included administrative clauses he'd apparently signed without fully understanding. The investigation revealed that Meridian Elite Capital was a legitimate investment firm, but Dad's specific account had been established under a structure that allowed for administrative liquidation without his direct authorization. The lawyers said everything was technically legal, though the account structure was unusual. Dad never recovered financially from the loss. He had to sell the house in Westchester and most of his possessions to cover debts he'd accumulated based on his assumed wealth. The family's lifestyle changed dramatically almost overnight. But he also became a more humble and thoughtful person. He stopped making comments about other people's financial situations and began expressing genuine appreciation for non-monetary forms of success. At our next family gathering held in Mom and Dad's much smaller apartment, Dad pulled me aside. David, I've been thinking about our conversation that night. About lifestyle and financial security. What about it? I realize now that I was measuring everything by the wrong standards. You chose work that gives you satisfaction and meaning. That's actually much more valuable than I understood. He looked around the modest apartment with something that might have been contentment. Maybe this is what I deserve. And maybe what you have is what actually matters. I never told Dad that I own Meridian Elite Capital, or that his investment portfolio had been funded by my own assets as an elaborate 3-year lesson in humility. Some truths are more valuable when they remain hidden. The $75 million returned to my primary investment fund, where it continued generating returns through legitimate business ventures and carefully managed portfolios. I kept working at the community college, living in my modest apartment and driving my 20-year-old Honda. Family gatherings became more meaningful after that. Less focus on money, more focus on relationships. Dad learned to measure success differently, and I learned that sometimes the most expensive gifts are the ones that teach people what truly matters.